North America is one of the most diverse, vast, and widely populated landmasses on the planet. Measuring nearly 25 million square kilometers across and home to almost 600 million people, this continent boasts deserts, plains, rainforests, tundra, woodland, coasts, and caves, amongst many other habitats. The first people to set foot in the Americas trickled down from the north, encountering a world of untouched beauty and strange creatures. And today we will be taking a look at the first people to settle in these lands. From the icy stretches of northern Canada to the tropical jungles of the Caribbean, join us as we meet those who first crossed into this strange new world. Before we examine the settlements made by the first people in North America, we must consider how the first Americans got there. It is widely known that humans first evolved in Africa and spread out across the world over the course of thousands of years, heading first into Asia and Europe before spreading to Oceania and the Americas. The first human inhabitants of North America arrived from Siberia's Bering Strait between 20 and 25,000 years ago. These ancient hunter-gatherers were able to pass over by traveling east across a now non-existent land bridge that was connecting the northeasternmost tip of Asia with the northwesternmost tip of North America, crossing over first into what is now Alaska before traveling into Canada and eventually the mainland United States. Once they passed through harsh environments of ice fields, boreal forests, and windswept tundra, these people found themselves in more temperate, hospitable regions where they could hunt, explore, create, and eventually settle. The very first people in North America would have entered a world as abundant in resources as it was in peril. Thousands of miles of untouched woodland and grassland permitted bountiful foraging for those brave enough to tackle run-ins with big cats, bears, and giant ground sloths. Around 16,000 years ago, early humans had populated every corner of the continent, with the exception of the islands of northern Canada. This left humanity with just one continent to explore, with the exception of the uninhabited Antarctica. South America, the final continental frontier of human migration, was reached around 14,000 years ago. For those who had populated the Americas, however, the clock was ticking. 13,000 years ago, the Bering Strait land bridge connecting Asia to North America began to disappear. Warming temperatures across the globe led to the melting of ice, which ultimately raised sea levels, covering the bridge entirely. This meant that for anybody currently living in North or South America, there was no way back to Asia without a very well-built boat, something that technologically was not yet available to the prehistoric tribes living in the New World. The people of Eurasia would not meet with the people of America again until the 980s, when the Vikings arrived in Greenland after sailing the North Atlantic. Here they would meet the Beothuk and Thule groups of Native Americans, relatives of the Algonquins and Inuits respectively. These voyages would never be famous in Europe, and later contact would not be made until Christopher Columbus traveled to the Americas in 1492, setting forth a chain of events that would change the course of history for Americans and Europeans. By the time Columbus reached America, the native people had been living in these lands for thousands of years. So what did these early settlements look like, and who founded them? The first human beings to make it into North America would have soon found themselves in land which would one day belong to the nation of Canada. The earliest known evidence that we have of humans having settled, at least temporarily, in ancient Canada comes from Bluefish Caves, close to the Alaskan border within the Yukon. Within the first of these caves, manipulated bone flakes have been found, once belonging to mammoths, which in turn have been associated with the presence of early humans, who rested and possibly lived in the cave around 24,000 years ago. The presence of these handcrafted flakes has caused controversy in the archaeological community over the years, as it was previously thought that humans arrived in the region around 13,000 years ago, drastically changing the time frame of the first humans in the region. It appears likely that humans did use these caves as a rest stop on their way through the Yukon wilderness, or perhaps they formed an early community and lived here for a length of time. In the early years of North America's people, this was the norm. Bands of hunter-gatherers would seek refuge in caves or other sheltered places where they could evade the dangers of the elements. They would stay in these locations until they needed to move on, or until they were ousted by predators or rival tribes. Remains of a settlement thought to date back around 14,000 years have since been discovered on Trickled Island, roughly 300 miles north of Victoria, British Columbia. Thought to be one of the oldest constructed settlements in North America, researchers have discovered spears, fishing hooks, and remains of a cooking hearth with preserved flakes of charcoal still present at the site. The people living here were the Heiltsuk First Nation people, who lived here for an extended period of around 7,000 years, likely using it as a base to hunt and gather around the region they called home. Elsewhere at the site, researchers have uncovered caches of primitive tools, including hand drills that could be used to help light a fire, and fishing lures crafted from wood, which were likely dragged along the bottom of a river to catch creatures living in their depths. Living on the coast of Canada, they're thought to have obtained the majority of their meat, outside of fishing, from hunting seals with specially crafted spears. On land, these piscivores would have been relatively easy to catch, and their meat would have fed a small population of people for several days. Throughout its time housing ancient Native Americans, the settlement appears to have been battered by 2 tsunamis, which may have caused the abandonment and reclamation of the site by different groups of people more than once. Research is still ongoing, and scientists hope to unearth more of the location's secrets as time goes on. The oldest preserved human footprints in the United States, and possibly the oldest in all of North America, can be seen at White Sands National Park near the southern border of what is now New Mexico. Around 60 prints, clearly human in shape and size and buried in gypsum soil, are thought to have been made between 23 and 13,000 years ago, with the high degree of uncertainty that comes with the mystery of when exactly people first arrived on the continent. Alongside the footprints can be seen the much larger tracks of the Columbian mammoth and the ground sloth Paramylodon, 2 species that these early people likely hunted. A large lake, Lake Otero, once covered the area and was soon inhabited by ancient Americans. Evidence for their settlements in these lands can be seen in the presence of abundant stone points, which were attached to spear poles to be thrown through the air with force after prey. Later Americans would replace these spears with atlatls, tools that provide leverage for a spear to be thrown, allowing them to be launched through the air at great speed. One of the earliest and longest used sites in America by ancient people can be seen in the Meadowcroft Rock Shelter, located in Jefferson Township, Pennsylvania. Ancient humans are thought to have inhabited this rock shelter, naturally situated on a hill overlooking a tributary of the Ohio River, for 19,000 years continuously since it was discovered. Different groups of people would have claimed the site over the course of this time, and many digs at the site have uncovered pottery, blades, jewelry, crafting flint, and cooking hearths attributed to different tribes and communities. Food remains at Meadowcroft show that people living here ate a wide variety of meals, ranging from small mammals and birds to fruits, nuts, and vegetables. Another archaeological site debated to be one of the oldest in America is Topper, located in the Allendale County of South Carolina along a stretch of the Savannah River. Some artifacts from Topper may predate America's Clovis people by over 3,000 years. which include fluted points, charcoal from fires, and possibly early artwork. The people living at Topper had the best of both worlds when it came to the surrounding environment. On one side, a cool, deciduous woodland, and on the other, a warm, temperate woodland. Each habitat would have contained different animals, plants, and types of wood and rock, allowing for a great deal of variety in the tool production seen by Topper's residents. Mexico and the stretch of Central American land that connects North America to South America are extremely significant in terms of prehistoric life. This stretch of land allowed many species of animals to migrate between the two continents, eventually allowing humans to make their way down into South America. Some groups of ancient humans, however, opted to stay in the fertile lands and lush tropical environments of Mexico and Central America, allowing for a vast selection of cultures to form. Some of the oldest human remains from this time belong to a young woman and two men, one of whom was middle-aged, discovered at the site of San Pedro Laundry close to Ostahuacan. These skeletons, discovered in 1953, are thought to be roughly 10,000 years old and may have belonged to an early family. Little is known of the technology or culture belonging to these people, however. We know that they lived alongside big cats, ground sloths, mammoths, and mastodons, as well as giant armadillos, some of whom they may have hunted if they were members of a larger community. The earliest human settlements to have produced concrete remains that are non-organic are those belonging to the Tlatilco culture, such as the Tlatilco village itself. Over 300 burial sites have been found here, within the modern-day Mexican Federal District, whose people would eventually grow in number along the shores of Lake Texcoco. Pottery, figurines, and brick-making technologies have been discovered here, which puts these ancient Mexicans a little further forward on the timeline than the other communities we've discussed in today's video. By the time the Tlatilco culture was thriving, the megafauna were extinct, and these people had settled down into an agricultural society much more advanced than the basic hunter-gatherers that came before them. This was a sign of things to come across not only the future lands of Mexico, but North America as a whole. Despite the fact that we are constantly learning about the first people who made their way to the continent of North America, there is still much we do not know. All we can see of these ancient peoples are their remains, tools, and simple structures, and with the exception of later communities such as the Tlatilco culture, we can know very little of their beliefs, ideas, or creations. With luck, further excavations and studies in the ancient lands occupied by the first Americans will yield much more information, from which we can form a better, clearer, more in-depth idea